Ready. Today I want to talk about the boomer generation. And honestly, not even just the boomer generation, but the older generation, generations in general, like millennials and boomers. As a Gen Z guy, all right, let's get into it. I think there's a lack of understanding for one another for our generations, and I want to use it. I want to use an example in certain social dynamics that I've witnessed countless times over and over and over again. A lot of times when I'm walking these certain trails, I see a lot of people my generation, and they tend not to be as open to anything social. And I know some people. I know some people in like my generation will say like, "Oh well, like it's like the Gen Z stare," or it's because of like the rudeness that we've received from the older generations, just being younger and being alive. And which I totally understand that, but like I'm not an older guy. I'm in this generation. I'm an older guy, and I'm in this generation, and I still, like I still find it hard to reach out to people my age, where like trying to bridge the gap now, where like the older generation, they like generally most people are kind of like this antisocial realm, and it's not just young people, it's older people too. And some people might even say like, well, older people, like, have you seen them? Like if like if you were going to a hospital, I've heard of like nurses, techs, and like even some providers say like, hey, like these older people, like if I find it hard to reach out to them because if you think about it, they never had they never grew up with that technology. So all this stuff is like super new to, I mean, new to everyone, but for us, like we grew up with it, so we kind of just learned to distance manage a little bit better than them. But generally, I haven't found that to be true. Generally, but now getting back on track, I've had times where I'm walking down a trail and I'll say hi to a person my age and they'll say hi back. And I've had times when I'm walking down a trail or in a grocery store or whatever, and I try to say hi to older people, and they look at me and just ignore me. So I think it really does go both ways. And like even like in the gym setting, I'm in the gym, and I think older people generally have a harder time dealing with the antisocialness in a social setting. And I'm generally the same way. Like I'm trying to get out of this antisocialness. So, for example, like there's that trend where it's like, man, I had such beef with like someone's dad or someone's grandpa in the gym, and I go up and talk to them, and it figures out like, hey, well, we're both pretty cool, and one or the other might say, well, I never had a problem, and the older guy might say, well, I never had a problem either. Truth be told, they both had a problem. Like let's be so for real right now. They both kind of had in their back of their mind that they had a problem. The younger guy thought like, oh, this older guy hates me just because I'm younger. The older guy would probably think like, oh, this generation is destroying the society. I've had situations in the gym where it was just that, where older people would like, they kind of get like these little cliques together, like straight out of like high school or middle school, and they'll start like gossiping behind your back and such. They'll start gossiping behind your back. But I want to get into a little bit of understanding from like their side. So from their side, they grew up like, a lot of them are probably like just now coming to the gym. Now it's kind of getting like more popularized and such. But even back then, everyone talked with one another inside the gym setting. Inside the gym setting, everyone communicated with one another, and not so much in the sense of like interrupting them mid-set, but they generally had more of a community and more overall connection with one another. So when they're in the actual gym, and they're kind of like looking around, and Like they're really trying like like everything to talk to people. Man, it just never clicks because people, like myself included, I'm guilty of this. Just kind of don't want to talk to anyone, you know, where they're very much used to talking to everyone. So I feel like that kind of creates a little bit of social frustration with one another, and it kind of boils up and eventually boils out. So now they get so frustrated. So when they do talk to people of my generation, you know, they tend to talk a little bit harshly. And I think overall we just need to kind of like recognize that. And you know, I think there is a lot of truth to both sides of you know, what the younger generations say and what the older generations say. But I think, truth be told, it's a lot of half truths. I don't think it's a lot of full truths to it. You know, like people will say, well, you know, Gen Z just doesn't want to work anymore. Gen Z is lazy. And my generation would say, well, the boomer generation, they got handed everything on a silver platter. You know, they got this, that, and the other. They got handed the world in their hands and they squandered it. And, you know, there's a little bit of truth to both of that. Really, it's not the full truth. You know, I think regardless if you want to get into like full truth and really go down that rabbit hole, you know, I think that stuff doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things of really getting like the verbatim, you know, truth out there. I think what really matters is that we just learn to set our differences aside and, you know, come back with one another. I know that's going to be extremely tough and extremely challenging and extremely hard. Believe me, because I definitely have tried. But I think the try is everything, you know? Like whether or not, you know, I approach 10 grandpas or 10 grandmas and only one of them out of the 10 is nice and we get like a nice conversation going, and, you know, maybe we even both agree, like, we got to set our differences aside, you know, whatever the truth or whatever the half-truths are. Because at the end of the day, like, man, we're supposed to be a loving community towards one another. But, you know, even if it's 1 out of 10 that I'm able to make work with, dude, that's still like the world. That's still the world, because, you know, even 0 out of 10, you know, at least I can say that I tried. At least I can say that I tried to, you know, do the right thing. At least I can say that I tried to do the right thing. At least I can say, well, hey, yeah, you know, that is true, but guess what? I'm still going to try anyways. You know, despite what everyone else is saying, despite what everyone else is saying about, you know, despite what everyone else is saying about, man, it's all hopeless. You know, there's no point to it anymore. Kind of get into like that doomer mindset. But just be able to say, like, I don't care. You know, in the face of hopelessness, you know, learn to have hope. And, you know, even when it doesn't make sense to try, but you still say, like, I'm still gonna try. I don't know where my path is leading. I don't know where this country's leading, but I'm still gonna try. And above all, I'm just gonna learn to have faith. And yeah, that's all I gotta say. All right, God bless.